Fabled The Spirit Lands, it's a solo game. It's a cooperative game. It's a semi-competitive cooperative game. And oh yes, it's a fully competitive game. And it does play anywhere from one to 4 players or 2 to 5 players, depending on what game form you're trying to play the game at. But is this a game that's going to be great for your board game group? We'll come on back after the break for a full review of Fabled The Spirit Lands. Hey everybody, welcome off the shelf, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to our wonderful tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at Fabled The Spirit Lands. Now, Fabled The Spirit Lands is a very interesting game to review because it's 3 basic games in one. And when you look at the game, you kind of have to look at all 3 of these aspects because that's a wonderful thing to say. It's very, very hard these days to find a great game that plays with all gaming groups. There are many great games that play great solo, kind of fall apart when you start throwing in multiple players. I'd like to mention Dawn of the Dead right here. Fantastic zombie survival game. But when you start adding in more players, there's less things for the players to do, and it has player elimination, and you know what can happen there. But I will tell you that Dawn of the Dead is probably one of the best solo games out there. Then you also have games such as games that play 1 to 4 players. They're great at those various player counts. Some of them play better at lower player counts. Some of them play better at the higher player counts when we're talking about those 1 to 4 player cooperative games. Let's look at games such as Pandemic. It's a great cooperative game that does play great at all those player counts. Then finally, you have competitive games, and this is a very strong, hard aspect of the gaming hobby that I always struggle with personally. My board gaming group happens to be 5, 6, and sometimes 7 players. Our hobby is so predominantly overrun by games that top off at the 4 player count, which are games that I can't enjoy. So this is one of those games that kind of ticks a lot of boxes for me that I want to throw out a high amount of kudos for before we go anywhere into this full review here. First of all, this is a game that's covering things that allow me to get this game to the table. It plays as a competitive game for 2 to 5 players. It also plays as a solo game, which is a game means I can pull out, play when my friends aren't available, when things are going on, or just when I just want to play a game, or if I want to play a cooperative game, one that's a little bit different, has a little bit different feel to it. Granted, this is a cooperative game where you're playing versus an AI. It still is very enjoyable. And not only that, because I do have friends who are a little bit more on the aggressive side. Okay, we like to go after each other tooth and nail when we play games. There's also a cooperative version of this game which allows for a little competition between the players. You're working together to take out the AI, but one of you is going to win better than the others, which can be something that's good for certain player groups. So I have to give high props to the game of Fabled The Spirit Lands for that one aspect. Being a great game in one single box without having to buy tons of expansions or other things, or tacked on, nailed on additions, and create a game that plays 3 different ways and plays pretty darn good on those aspects. Fabled The Spirit Lands is published by Crowdgames. It's created by Moreau's Development Studios. And there's a couple different designers on the game whose names I probably am not going to try because, well, I can pronounce one of them, maybe 2 of them. I'm not going to try to butcher the third guy's name. I don't think it's nice to them. But this is a group of people who have come together to create a really good game here that works very, very well. So Fabled The Spirit Lands has a pedigree of a good design studio who's designed quite a few actually really good games now, and they actually have some designers in the studio who have some pretty good chops. They design a couple other really good games. Some I've actually reviewed on my channel. I've enjoyed quite a bit. What does Fabled The Spirit Lands bring out that's different and evolves the game, and why do I enjoy this game, and what is the positive about this game? Well, there's quite a few things actually I like about this game because there's certain mechanics that are really always intriguing to me whenever I play a game. There's 2 core mechanics that anytime they're in a game, I'm always a little bit interested in. One of those mechanics are multi-use cards. If you ever have a game with multi-use cards, I'm usually in. At least I'm going to give it a try at least once, possibly twice, just to see if it's a game I'm going to like. Another style of gameplay that I also like is when your resources are your victory points. Why do I like these kinds of games? Because these are the kinds of games where every one of your decisions matters so darn much. This actually falls for both these kind of game categories that I actually like quite a bit. When it comes to multi-use cards, every time you have a multi-use card game, you're agonizing over every single decision you play with your card because this card could have 2, 3, or 4 possible uses for it. You need to pick one of those uses. That's the only use you're ever going to get for this card. In games where you need to spend your victory points as your resources, I like to mention the game of Evil High Priest, which is also a great game that does this aspect. you are spending your resources, which are potential for victory points, but you need to spend them to do things. So I enjoy this concept in games because it forces you to make very hard and very tough decisions, because the decisions you make could hamstring you, handicap you, or prove to be great boons in your gameplay depending on how you're playing. And it's a really, really cool mechanic. Do I spend the resources to bring out more lands, potentially losing victory points? But if the land I bring out isn't going to give me more victory points than the victory points I had to spend to make it happen. Because remember, in this game, depending on the scenario you're playing, some scenarios you just have to get Books of the Sun, or if you watch my gameplay video, I actually play one of the scenarios I actually like a lot in this game, where you're getting victory points for all of your resources, meaning that every single resource is precious, meaning every decision you make in the game is precious, meaning that everything you do, you just have to make sure, is this thing I'm doing right now going to pay out more than what I'm putting into it? You know, I'll say it's a little bit of a gamble, but it's not a gamble because this is a very strategic game with lots of open information, which is another thing that I greatly appreciate about this game. I really do enjoy games with open information because it's not a game of luck anymore. Anytime you have a game that is open information where all the players get to see everything the other players are doing, every decision you make, win or lose, you know, is because of your choices, your decisions, and your gameplay that affected whether you won or lost that game. You take a game that uses dice. You roll the dice. If I lose a dice game, I say, darn it, you know, that was a fun game. Dice just weren't my favorite today. Let's go and play again. Let's play a different game. Let's do whatever we want to do. You play a card game where you actually have a hand of cards and you're drawing cards, and those are the things that you're going to get. You have your own individual hand of cards. Every single player has their own individual hand of cards. Sometimes those games you'll play, you'll get a hand of cards and you'll say, yeah, the cards just didn't synergize it well this time, guys. Let's go and play another game, or let's pick another game to play, whatever you want to do. In a game like this, though, it's very, very interesting because aside for a couple unknown cards, the vast majority of the aspects of the game are known to all the players. And it's actually in the rules that everything is open to all the players. We are all competing for the same land pieces. We all know what every single other player's allies' powers are on the board, and we see everybody's position on the board at all times. So every single decision you're making in the game, I'm going to sit there and go, okay, I know this ally gives me this power. If I buy this landmass over here, if I put this landmass maybe right over here, maybe I can mess up this player while I can help myself, and then I might help this player over here. So, because they have that ability over there, and they're trying to get down this path. So it creates this really interesting gameplay, because on top of that, this is a game that has very limited amount of rounds. In a two-player game, you actually end up getting 10 rounds, but as you start adding more players to the game, the amount of rounds that are available in this game start shrinking quite a bit. So this becomes a game where you need to feed and piggyback off the other players in an effort to do very, very well. You want to make sure that you are on the land masses that the other players want to activate. That way you get free movement. So you kind of want to bring out the good land masses that are great for you, good for the other players, but not going to help them as much as it's going to help you. So it creates this really cool mind game, which is really, really interesting. I want to bring out these land masses. I may bring out this one right here and go, this one could help me quite a bit, but is it going to help another player a little bit, enough to entice them to go there? Because if I entice them to go there by moving across the path and going on to layer rounds, when they activate that, they're going to get their 2 points of movement, but I'm still going to get my 1 point of movement. So I'm kind of piggybacking off of their actions. And I really, really enjoy this because this goes together to create this really interesting gameplay. This gameplay of trying to incentivize other players to take actions which are going to help you while you're playing the game with open knowledge about the open lands, the open powers, and everything that's going on. And the really unknown in this game that ever really comes up is the events in the game, 3 different event decks based on different scenarios, however you want to play, and the possible randomization of the future cards that come out. Everything else about this game is 100% known across all the players. You all know the eventual goals, you know the objectives, you know all the resources all the other players have. Can you take all that information, capitalize on it better than any other player to win the game? Now, I think this is going to be one of those games that's going to be great for a large amount of game players out there for a couple of really, really good reasons. When I originally started my channel 10 years ago, yes, I've had this channel going for 10 years now, believe it or not. I find it amazing sometimes myself. When I first started the channel, one of the main reasons why I started this channel is because I wanted to find games to play with my younger kids at the time. Now, my oldest son is 18, my youngest one is 15, so I'm not really playing the kid games with them anymore. But back in the beginning, I was playing lots of kid games with them. I had Catan Jr., which I think has been renamed now. I had Kids of Carcassonne and other great family games that are great to play with younger players. This game actually has a little bit of a family levelness that I would have actually enjoyed playing back in those times. Probably not in the 5 to 8 years old range, but when they were getting 7, 8, 9, and 10, this would be a great game. Because what this game does is this game offers 6 different scenarios. The very basic scenario, effectively called the 0 level, the train scenario, actually works out great as a game to play with younger players because it's not super complex. You don't have all these different things with these random abilities, with these hidden powers that come out. You have 2 known buffs that are going to come out during the game. One of them is players can get some random extra resources. And then players get to make a decision about the allies that they have later on in the game. It's a very set way to play the game. Not much variety, and they kind of plan for it. Not only that, this game is not super duper aggressive. This is a game that does offer the ability to do a little bit of denial, but it's not denial that's going to be too complex for the younger kids. So that 0 scenario is actually pretty darn good to make this more of a family game and a game for people who have friends and family members who aren't quite gamers like the rest of us. But here's the cool thing. We also have 5 full-fledged scenarios that actually start adding to the complexity. Now, I'm not going to say that they're in order of complexity because I would actually say 1 is a standard game, 2 is more complex than 1, it's also more complex than 3, not more complex than 4 though, and I don't want to get into those scenarios. I'll probably talk a little bit more about that when I'll talk about that a little more in just a little bit here. But the scenarios themselves actually play out differently and they create some interesting different gameplay. Those levels of gameplay create different challenges and add to the replay and add to the variety of this game. If you just want to play the very basic game, you have the 0 level scenario. That's perfect for the families. If you want to play this game more with the gamers, you have the level 2 and the level 5 scenarios and a little bit of the level 4 scenario. If you have the gamers who are getting into the hobby, but they're not quite there, they're not ready to get those Vital Lacerda games to the table with them or anything like that, then the 1 and the 3 scenario are actually really, really good for those kind of players. And not only that, it does add in just enough gameplay to add enough variety and different gameplay thanks to these events and everything like that that allows players to enjoy this game while having a game that does not offer direct confrontation, but it does offer a little bit of player interaction with a little bit of denial, a little bit of ability, and a little bit of planning to force players to take moves when they're not ready to do so. So I like how the game blends all those mechanics together to create those nice, wonderful things. And of course, like I said multiple times, you can't beat the fact that it's a solo game, it's a co-op game, and it's a competitive game, and by God, it's so darn awesome that this game does play up to 5 players, at least if you want to play the competitive version. Now, all these scenarios do add a decent amount of variety to the game, especially with the way they're going to score. And the final scenario right here, the Wrath of the Winds, is also going to add a little bit of complexity. And it's, I think, like I said earlier, the gamers are going to enjoy 2 and 5. The non-gamers are probably going to enjoy 1, 3, and a little bit of 4. And I think that's one thing that's really, really cool and something I really do enjoy. That's a great thing that I really enjoy about the game. The game does have a couple negatives though, and they're going to pop up once in a while depending on the kind of scenarios you're playing, how you're marrying those scenarios with your play group, and how your play group likes to interact. This is a game that isn't super forgiving. This is a game that will allow you to occasionally make bad mistakes. And while this isn't one of those games that will allow you to have a turn where you can't do anything, this is definitely one of those games that will allow you to have turns where you're not accomplishing as much as you want to. And again, like I said, those different scenarios, you need to play them differently. You can't play the same way you play scenario 2, the same way you play scenario 5, the same way you play scenario 1. They require different strategies and different tactics, and that's definitely why I want to play through scenario 2 through my playthrough to show you how that's different. But this game can be a little bit unforgiving if you don't plan well. If you overspend on your prairie books and you can't get the land masses out, that can hamper you. If you spend too early into the game, start doing your conversions and don't have the resources you need, that can also hamper you. If you go out there and get too many resources and spend too much time building resources and don't focus on your conversions at the right time, you may end up at the end of the game with 0 victory points. It's possible to do that. This isn't the game that is going to hold your hand. It's not a game that's going to kick you in the teeth and throw you in the sand either, like some good Lacerda games can do. But this is definitely a game that will allow you to make mistakes. What does that mean? This means that this is a game that's going to grow on you. This isn't a game that you're going to master the first time you play it. The scenario is pretty much guaranteed that's not going to happen. But this is also a game that is not super hard to teach. It's not a game that's super hard to learn either. You basically, on your turn, are going to take 1 of 4 actions. Then you're going to do some movement. Then the board state may change. All the players may interact all together, which is a very, very cool thing. I don't want to segue into that, but I think it's absolutely phenomenal how this game keeps everybody plugged in on their turns. When it's not your turn and another player takes movement and forces you to take movement, you're forced to be thrown back into the game. So you can't just sit back there on your phone while everybody's taking their turn going, my turn yet? My turn yet? Nope. This is one of those games that keeps you plugged in, which is very, very cool. Something I greatly enjoy. I want to give some massive kudos about that. But I didn't mean to segue there, but I do want to emphasize that this is a game that will allow you to play bad until you start getting good at the game. There is a time and a strategy for everything in this game. There is a time to gather resources. There's a time to build up the board. And then there's a time to start getting those victory points. Plan those times well, and you're going to evolve with the game. Plan those times badly, and you're going to end up at possibly ending the game with maybe 1 or 2 victory points, while the winner may have 5, 6, or 7 victory points. Now, I am going to say that this isn't a game where you're going to score tons and tons of victory points. I would say the average winning score of this game is probably going to be 5 to maybe 8 victory points tops. You might get a little better than that. It depends if you're playing versus the AI. The AI can be, there's various different levels of the AI, which is cool. The easy AI, expect to get 8 or 9 victory points and win the game. The hard AI, expect to get your teeth kicked in because it can be pretty darn challenging. But I do enjoy the fact that this is a game that's going to grow on you, it's going to evolve with you, and it's going to allow you to get better as you play the game. This is definitely not one of those games where you're going to play once, go, yep, mastered that one, let's pick another game. That's just not going to happen with this game. And the reason why is because the scoring and plus learning all the combinations. Now this is where I want to talk about the cool combinations available with this game. This game has actually got a couple different tactics and strategies built into it. The strategies of gaining the resources, the strategies of building the map. But the biggest strategy of this game is making the combinations with all the allies in the game. Because I can guarantee you, every time you play the game, the person who can capitalize on their allies the best will win the game 90% of the time, just because the allies can be that powerful. This is a game that's a strategy game about all this, while capitalizing on your powers. And if you look here, you can see how many allies are available in the game, and understand that no player will ever get more than 3 allies in the game. And actually, if you're getting 3 allies, you're probably not playing at your best. Most of the time, best strategy is to get 2 allies and power up one of them, unless the allies you get aren't synergizing, or unless you get a really good combination. You can get some really cool things that are going on here. But that's what's really cool, and this is where a large amount of the replay comes from the game. These cool allies and all the combinations you get with allies and how they interact with the board and the other players, plus all those scenarios. It's a great combination that goes together to create a really intriguing gameplay. Now, when it comes to player count, this is where we actually get something that's very, very interesting about the game. I can safely say that this game is great at all player counts, as long as you're willing to play all 3 different versions of the game, obviously. Obviously, solo is only going to play best as a 1-player game. Not trying to sound hyperbolic here. But I am going to say that I feel that this game, when it comes to player count, the purely competitive game, playing it as a 2-player game, I would probably suggest that you would probably be better off playing the cooperative competitive version and getting a 3rd AI in there. Because while it's enjoyable as a 2-player game, I didn't get as much interaction between kind of, I don't want to say screwing over the other players, but kind of messing with the other players. That seems to happen a lot more in the higher player count of the game in the fully competitive game. When you play this game as a 4 or 5-player game in the competitive game, your actions are going to be so darn important, because you're going to pick one landmass. It's going to help a lot of players on the table. When you're playing this game as a 2-player game, it's very much possible for it to feel a little bit more of a solo-ish game, or it becomes more of a race because you're not going to interact with the other players quite as much. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but the amount of interaction between the 2-player game and the 5-player game, there's definitely a level of difference there, and you will notice it when you play it. So I would say as a 2-player game, you probably want to look at a cooperative competitive version. 3, 4, and 5-player game, well, 3 and 4, obviously cooperative competitive is fine, or the fully competitive version. And of course, as a 5-player game, competitive is perfectly fine. But I do enjoy how this game is going to play at all those player counts, just as long as you want to play slightly differently. And of course, like I mentioned multiple times, any one of these scenarios. So some of those scenarios definitely do play better at certain player counts. And I definitely want to give kudos for that. I am so happy to find more and more games in the hobby these days that play at more than 4 players. Like I've said multiple times, my player group doesn't play 4-player games. If you start looking at my shelf, you're starting to see that I'm slowly starting to weed out the 4-player games out of my collection. I'm starting to donate them, unless it's a game that can be played solo. If it's a solo game, I'm okay with it playing 4-player. But it's a competitive game, it needs to play 5 players, or it's slowly working its way towards goodwill for me. So I'm really happy to see more of these 5-player games. Now, before we close here, I just want to take a minute to go ahead and talk about all the components here, because I think the components are definitely something that's worth mentioning here, because there is some phenomenal amount of artwork that comes with this game. This is some great artwork, and what I'm very happy to say is that these are full size, actually more than full size cards. They're not quite tarot size. Actually, they might be pretty close to tarot size, but these are definitely larger than the standard playing cards. And these cards are large size. They're thick quality. There's a lot of cards with lots of fantastic artwork. Everything has great artwork, and you don't see recycled artwork, which is really, really good. I can just show you two cards right here, right now. This is a forest card. This is a forest card. Artwork isn't recycled. Okay, the trees may look kind of the same, but even them, they look different. They did a great job with the artwork of the game. Great components. These are actually wooden components. I mean, fantastic, not cheap little tiny little chits that you see in some games, full-fledged wooden components, and even the meeples that come with the game, they're all silk screened on both sides. They're shaped meeples. It's fantastic. It looks great. This is a wonderful production design that went into this game. I so greatly enjoy when companies take the extra time to create a game that is stimulating for the mind and also visually stimulating. And this is definitely one of those games that definitely fits that bill. It all looks great. It all plays perfectly fine. The only thing that may cause a little bit of consternation for some people is when you play with a 5-player game, the amount of books of knowledge is very, very tight. There is just barely enough books for all the players in a 5-player game, to the point where you may find yourselves having to make a change constantly. Well, I shouldn't say constantly. That seems like I'm being a little disingenuous here, but you will feel there's a tight amount of these books sometimes. Sometimes you'll be fighting for singles and having to ask somebody, hey, can somebody cash in 3 singles for a 3 so I can get a couple of singles back? But beyond that, there is a great amount of variety, great look to the game, and the components just do a really fantastic job. Not only that, game publishers, game companies, please, please, please stand up, take note. Player aids that are actually great player aids, they're all double-sided, and enough player aids for more players at the table, for all the players at the table to have a player aid, so when they're learning the game, it makes it so darn easy to learn the game. More companies, can you please do that? Because we have the great player aids there. We have the player aid at the back of the book. It is so darn nice. I would love more companies to do this. So what's my final opinion on Fabled The Spirit Lands? Fabled The Spirit Lands, I greatly enjoy this game. It's a fun game. I like the challenge. I like the different play modes and the different scenarios and the amount of replay and the amount of variety you're going to get out of this game. It's a game that I'm pretty happy that I was able to get the chance to play. I'm enjoying it greatly. I want to actually play it more and more and more, and that's always a great sign for me. Great player count, great variety, great replay variety, great artwork, really enjoyable, lots of deep strategies, a game that I greatly enjoy. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you've been enjoying this video series looking at Fabled The Spirit Lands. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to get to them as quick as I can. And also feel free to email me off the show board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those emails as quick as I can. If you enjoy the content, you enjoy the videos I put out there, think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just $1 tip jar is a great way to say thanks. Patreon.com/OTSBGR. This channel is 100% sponsor free, which means I'm not beholden to sponsors who I have to sell their products and try to convince you to buy the products or with one-line interruptions or anything like that. But what it does mean is always that everything you see on the channel comes in my own pocketbook. You can help with that by tossing $1 in the tip jar, but you don't have to even do that. 2 mouse clicks and 2 seconds of your time. Click that like button, click that subscribe button. Tells those YouTube analytics that this is a great channel that other people should be watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this video series. Check out the other videos in the series, a quick overview, how to play, gameplay for the different gameplay formats, and of course this review itself. As always, thanks for watching.